all the circle be unbroken.
Today, we'll be rounding out the Bioshock collection by taking a look at Bioshock Infinite on the PS4 and the Potato Masher. If you don't know, the Potato Masher is a $375 PC custom built in 2014 and designed to compete with the PS4 for the rest of its life cycle. The goal is not to pick on consoles, but to show that PC gaming can be just as good or better for the same money. There's more info in the description, so let's get to it. While the PS4 version of Infinite is a remaster, the PC version is the original. It's not that old, and the assets are suitably high quality, so it didn't need a remaster. As such, you can make the argument that it's a slightly unfair comparison given that the PC version has had numerous patches and optimizations over the years since launch, and the PS4 version is brand new. Still, not having to pay extra for remasters is an advantage of the PC platform, and Infinite is quite a bit cheaper on PC right now. The game looks fantastic on the Potato Masher. I'm playing with everything on very high settings at 1080p and 60 FPS. While the usual light aliasing typical for 1080p gaming is present with shimmering edges on distant objects, the level of detail and overall object quality is very consistent with modern games. The same is true on the PS4 with a few exceptions. While the Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2 remasters were largely the same version on PC and consoles, with texture filtering being the largest difference, the PS4 version of Infinite appears to be running at close to high settings, not very high. The Masher looks slightly better in a few areas and quite a bit better in others. The largest difference is again anisotropic texture filtering. The PS4's textures look embarrassingly bad at distance, and not at all like a modern game should look with the technology we have available. The PC's textures might also be a little bit better, but frankly it's hard to tell with texture filtering this non-existent. The other differences are more minor. The Masher has slightly better God rays, reflections, and environmental effects like fog and smoke. These differences are small enough that you might miss them if you aren't comparing the two platforms side by side, but they are there. The last difference is more noticeable. Due to the game world being streamed in on Unreal Engine 3, the PS4 suffers from frequent slowdown and stutters at various sections in the game, and it is noticeable. This was a problem that numerous players experienced on the PC version when it launched, but has been greatly improved over the past few years. The Masher was not entirely stutter-free, as it had a few small hitches in the same sections. This could be due to the relatively average hard drives that the PS4 and Masher are using, or it could be limitations of their older CPUs. Still, the Masher was considerably better, and I hope the PS4 version is able to be patched to be better than it is, as it is distracting during action sequences. I've linked Digital Foundry's analysis in the description of this video as they go a bit more in-depth on this particular issue if you're interested. Both platforms look good, but the Masher looks and runs a bit better. Higher frame rates aren't just about cutting down on the choppy feeling of 30 FPS or making animations look smoother. Input latency is greatly reduced, making games feel more responsive and faster. Games feel more receptive to the player's inputs, so it's well worth trying out if you have the hardware to support it. At very high settings in 1080p, disabling VSync lets the Masher vary from 70 to 100 FPS. Keep in mind that I can only record as fast as 60 FPS, so the footage looks choppier than it would in person. This frame rate is not quite fast enough to take advantage of an 144Hz monitor, but there are 75Hz and 96Hz monitors starting to hit the market, so it might be a good match for one of them as long as I was using a variable refresh rate technology like G-Sync or FreeSync. Dropping to high settings, the Masher looks largely the same as the PS4 version, except for the texture filtering, and the frame rate varies between 115 and 150 FPS most of the time. This looks and plays great, and would be perfect for an 144Hz monitor. Still, this is all just at 1080p, so what can the Masher do at different resolutions? Invariably, someone always asks about 720p performance, so rest assured the Masher has no problems there. At 720p and, of course, very high settings, the frame rate varies between 90 and 180 FPS. It does just fine. Moving up to 4 times that resolution, at 1440p and high settings, the Masher stays locked at 60 FPS most of the time. There were a few small drops in the same places I saw drops at 1080p, but I can count them on one hand in a half hour of playtime and it wasn't that big of a deal. At 1440p, the aliasing is noticeably better, and the high-quality art assets gain a little clarity that's not present at 1080p. Even if you only have a 1080p display, Overdriving the resolution produces nice results and it's worth checking out. Dropping the settings to low and unlocking the frame rate, the Masher managed 1440p at 115 to 160 FPS. Again, this is a great match for an 144Hz monitor, and it's surprisingly good looking for low settings on a game that's already a few years old. The art style holds up. Moving to 4K, the Masher can mostly sustain 60 FPS at low settings, but there are much more frequent frame rate drops during action or large set pieces, so the experience is not quite stable enough for me to enjoy it. If you don't mind disabling VSync and having your frame rate vary between 40 and 70 FPS, the game is still very playable and it does drop less than the PS4 version does currently, but it's not how I prefer to game. The last gen consoles ran Infinite at 30 FPS, so I did raise the settings to high, 4K, and lock the frame rate at 30 just to see how it felt. While I still saw a handful of drops to 25 to 28 FPS, the game was much more stable than at 60 FPS. Again, this is not how I personally prefer to play shooters, but the added resolution does look very nice, and if 30 FPS doesn't bother you, I imagine you'd enjoy it.
Will the circle be unbroken?
Bioshock Infinite is my favorite of the series. The music and setting beautifully complement the art style and story, and the cohesive whole transcends the darker beauty of the first two games for me. Infinite is well optimized on the PC, and there are a large variety of frame rates and resolutions you can experiment with to find the perfect blend for you. The Masher handles the game very well, and due to the PS4's very poor texture filtering and less stable frame rate, the Masher is again the winner. However, I want to stress a point here. While I love helping people make informed decisions about which platform might be the best fit for their gaming habits and preferences, and I do think that the PC is the technically superior platform most of the time, technical superiority is not all that gaming should be about. Frankly, it shouldn't be the main thing at all. We're all here because we love games. Games like Bioshock Infinite are worth playing even if the frame rate isn't perfect or the texture filtering is bad on the PS4. Games have the power to transport us to other worlds and resonate with us in ways that other mediums aren't able to do, and that experience is worth having even if it isn't perfect. While I do think the PC platform has the flexibility to give you a better experience, and the Masher is a fantastic value, you should play the Bioshock collection on any platform you can. If you enjoyed this video, check out the original build video or any of the other Potato Masher videos linked on screen. This project was started by the Casual Shenanigans Gaming Podcast, so click the link to check us out. You can support this channel and the Potato Masher project by tossing me a few bucks on Patreon. It helps me test new games quicker and better. Thank you for your support, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.
Songs of heaven, which you say with childish voice, do you